Recent mock drafts have put J.J. McCarthy as high as pick number 8 overall, and McCarthy is a very controversial player. On this video, I take a dive into everything involved in why I believe McCarthy's stock rise is more substance than hype, the state of the quarterback position around the NFL, the 2025 quarterback position, and J.J. McCarthy himself as a prospect. If you like this video, make sure to hit the like button and let's dive into the quarterback position around the NFL and J.J. McCarthy. To begin, I have 4 quarterbacks listed at 36 or older going into next season at Matt Stafford, Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson, and Aaron Rodgers. It's important to note that 2 of those players are also coming off of torn Achilles. I have 2 more quarterbacks at 33 or higher in Derek Carr and Geno Smith. And then there are 4 of the 6 quarterbacks drafted in the first round between 2021 and 2022, where all 4 might be out of a job as soon as the beginning of next year in Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, and Kenny Pickett. Outside of those 10 quarterbacks, there are 21 quarterbacks who are ranked higher than Aiden O'Connell on Keep Trade Cut, and that includes a number of quarterbacks who are still unlikely to be long-term starters, or at least you don't have a ton of confidence in being long-term starters, like Justin Fields, Bryce Young, Will Levis, and Daniel Jones. This also includes Baker Mayfield, as well as Deshaun Watson, who comes with his own set of problems. On top of this, there are substantial questions about the 2025 quarterback class. Now, to begin, there's going to be a lot of small things mentioned about these quarterbacks really quickly because I don't want to get too deep into it. So just know that there are longer conversations with all these things. So if you disagree, I understand, and I don't have time to defend it in this episode. I just want to give a general state of this quarterback class because it's important to note that between 2023 and 2024, at this point, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Caleb Williams, and Drake May in their respective years were already household names, and we can define that by a number of different ways, but each of those players was at least a top 10 Heisman finalist by their sophomore year, or in their sophomore year. Bryce Young and Caleb Williams won the award, and Stroud and May both received enough votes to finish in the top 10. It's also important to note that youth production is very important. While this class does have a Jaden Daniels, and it might also have Bo Nix and potentially Michael Penix Jr., all going in the first round, early declares have made up the last 7 quarterbacks taken in the top 11. So teams still put a priority as much as they can on early declares, and from a profiling perspective, we should be expecting early declares from a year out to be the quarterbacks we're focusing on the most. The problem is when we get into the early declare potentials for 2025, there's a lot of issues. Penn State's Drew Aller was the highly rated prototype, but he completed under 60% of his passes and completed under 45% of his passes against Michigan and Ohio State. Cade Klubnik never really had as good of tools as Drew Aller, and he had a 6.3 yards per attempt and a 21-12 touchdown to INT so far. So those aren't really the kind of numbers, Cade Klubnik from Clemson, that you really need to see. Connor Wegman from Texas A&M is moving into my quarterback 1 in terms of the true juniors almost by default, and that's basically because he got hurt in 2023 and didn't play at all. And I don't mean for that to sound so bleak, but he probably would. And because of how low his total games played is at this stage of his career, I would also say that the smart money is that he is not a 2025 quarterback prospect. Obviously, that can happen if he has a great year. A team's going to want him to come out, but teams also want quarterbacks in particular to still get like 2 full years most often of starting if they can. And unless Connor Wegman blows the doors off because he is still a young prospect, I would imagine that he goes back for a 4th year at Texas A&M, and I think that is the most likely outcome at this point. The next highest ranked player would be someone like Noah Fafita, and to be honest, I haven't done the due diligence into Noah Fafita yet, but I have not seen anybody talk about him like a first round pick, and that usually says something alone. And then in terms of the non-early declares, you do have a couple good intriguing guys, but Shedeur Sanders had a great start, but he fell off after they went from the veer and shoot offense. The veer and shoot offense is the same one that Hendon Hooker used in Tennessee. And then it's also important to note that while he is only a true senior, he must have started school late or else he's not a true senior. And all the numbers I've seen are wrong, or the data I've seen is wrong, because according to his age, which I do assume is probably more accurate than most prospects because Shedeur Sanders is a significantly bigger celebrity than almost any prospect in college football, his age would be much closer to Jaden Daniels. He's about next year he'll be respectively about 8 weeks younger than Jaden Daniels is for this class. So Shedeur Sanders is a pretty old quarterback prospect for being a senior. And then again, he fell off after that veer and shoot system. The offensive coordinator this year is going to be Pat Shurmur. Yes, that Pat Shurmur. I don't know if that's a great thing for the college production. Carson Beck, good arm, great size. He might be trending towards being my quarterback one of the class overall, but he just hasn't shown that much. It's still from a limited number of games, and he's not the most mobile quarterback. And then Quinn Ewers talked about it in the Mitchell thing from Texas. I really think that Steve Sarkisian offense is very paint by numbers, and he, more than maybe any other quarterback in this class, operates a very, he's very much a system quarterback to me right now. Maybe he grows out of it, but the point is that while as the last 2 years we've been able to look ahead and say, wow, we're really excited what's coming next, we can debate whether people were more excited with Caleb Williams in May than Young and Stroud, which I believe they were. But the point is that there were quarterbacks that people were looking forward to significantly the last 2 years who had both already put up top 10 Heisman seasons, and those do not exist in this class. So you don't have that many quarterbacks. You have a lot of aging out quarterbacks. The 2025 class is not looking that great. The bottom line is all of this is going to come together to make J.J. McCarthy at the very least, and probably Nix, and probably even Penix fly up the board. And it wouldn't honestly surprise me if Spencer Rattler flew up the board too. Not necessarily saying first round, but there has been, the buzz on Spencer Rattler has also been consistent. This is kind of going to tie me into the J.J. McCarthy thing. But I watch more college football than NFL football. And I can tell you that people who are saying that the McCarthy and the Spencer Rattler buzz is coming out of nowhere were not paying attention to the same sources I was listening to. Because mid-season, I was hearing that. It wasn't that I was hearing, oh my gosh, McCarthy's the greatest quarterback ever. Oh my gosh, Spencer Rattler, he's the greatest quarterback ever. I was hearing the NFL is higher on these guys than a lot of people think. That's just generally what I heard from people probably like Brugler, probably like just anybody else that I was able to key in on that I believe have sharp lists in this field. And so I do think on one end you have a horrible, quarterback hype is always going to be a thing. So a lot of people might think, well, quarterback hype is quarterback hype. But I think it's going to be different because I truly do believe that we saw a glimpse of this in 2021. And I don't think that the aging out situation was as bad in 2021 as it is now. And so, that was the draft where we had 5 quarterbacks go by the top 15 picks. And so, the quarterback premium, I think, is going to be at an all-time high in the draft this year. And that's why someone who I say in a vacuum, I'm comfortable with taking J.J. McCarthy for a team probably between 20 and 25. Pick 20 and 25. That's why I said in the first show. But I understand why he's going in the top 10 because of this position in this marketplace and what he does have from an upside perspective, right? So let's get into J.J. McCarthy himself, all right? 21 in late January, just turned 21, listed at 6'3", 202 pounds. The 202 pounds is the first thing to talk about just because he is a very lean guy. And that's going to come into the, how do you look at age? Is he a projectable frame guy or is he probably just a lean guy? Because, Jaden Daniels, the whole selling point that I discussed in his profile is just the idea that he did change fundamentally over the 5 years he was in college from a 170-pound skinny guy who is kind of quick to a 205-pound, yes, he's lean, but much more explosive athlete. And I'm not necessarily saying that J.J. McCarthy is going to, become an explosive rusher, but he definitely could add some weight still that you would not necessarily project on someone, if he was the age of Daniels, Nix, or Penix to continue to add that weight. In 29 games in the last 2 years, he had 44 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, and he is not just young, but I think the biggest thing is, I talk about the age, a lot of people talk about the age. The age is very important to point out, to contextualize things, but it's not the fact that he is young. It is the fact that he is young and got a lot better from 2022 when he was 19 to 2023 when he was 20, right? So some of those improvements, 64.6 completion to 72.3% completion, about a jump of 8%. 8.4 yards per attempt to 9 yards per attempt. Not a huge jump, but a jump. 75.7% passing grade to an 87.9 passing grade. 87.9 is under the ideal I look for a peak season. So that's crucial, and that's part of the reason why, for me, J.J. McCarthy is in that 2025 pick range from a grading perspective. But it's still a huge jump from the 75 range to the high 80s. And then this is actually my favorite number. I used it a few times. I used it in one of the pieces that I wrote up during the year about why J.J. McCarthy's stock was improving. And without play action in 2022, and I got this tip off from Bud Elliott of the Cover 3 podcast. Without play action in 2022, J.J. McCarthy completed 62.6% of his passes at 6.6 yards per attempt and a 12-4 touchdown to INT. That is a 62.3 PFF grade. In 2023, he completed 71% of his no play action passes, an increase of 8.4%, for 8.2 yards per attempt, an increase of 1.6, 16 touchdowns, 4 more, 3 interceptions, 1 less, and an 84.9 PFF passing grade, a jump up of 22. So that's without the aid of play action, at least according to PFF. And so why is he making these progressions, and do you expect to make more, I guess, is going to be the next natural question that comes up. And I think a couple of things to note from a traits perspective, some of the building block traits that I think a lot of people are looking for more and more are things like pressure to sack and avoiding turnovers, right? They're not, other than the pure physical things, like the arm talent, which JJ does have in terms of having a high velocity arm, the pressure to sack, and avoiding turnovers with that arm talent and the mobility that he has. Those are the perfect 4 real building blocks that you want in a prospect. Now, to be clear, whether he becomes a good quarterback or not is more likely going to come down to how well he reads a field. But the development and the ability to read the field is something that most prospects have to go to and improve at, because the level that they've done it at their whole lives is nothing near the level that they're going to have to do it at the NFL level. So having these 4 essential building blocks is a huge thing for J.J. McCarthy. He also had a very good relationship with his quarterback coach, Kirk Campbell. This was something that was discussed a lot in the offseason, that he developed a lot his footwork in the offseason, and a lot of people thought that he was going to make a leap. It was something I had made a note of. I obviously didn't believe it. I mean, I didn't take him in like a Devy league that I'm in, that I could have gotten him extremely cheap because people were out on him. But I did make a note of it, and when he started making those improvements and he started showing a little bit better mechanically, and he's incredible at being accurate on the run too, which is, part of that, staying tight mechanically. I do take note that was a preseason narrative that got put out a lot. And then I've said this a few times in a few different platforms, but I think J.J. McCarthy is going to have the highest intangible score for teams. And this is purely my own speculative read from someone who just watches a lot of college football and listens to how everybody talks about everybody else. But I think J.J. McCarthy has a really nice blend of being someone that coaches like because he is going to be disciplined in the right ways, but also somebody that coaches like because he's going to have a little bit of the flair. And so this is going to be one of the dumbest examples I ever use in this podcast. I promise this is going to be one of the dumbest examples I ever use in this podcast. But I remember that little video after the national championship that went viral when he tossed the trophy that can very easily break, just like a 1.5 feet to his teammate. And it's just like, am I silly for saying this myself? Yes, I feel silly for saying this. But that's the kind of it feels a little risky, but is it really? Okay, if he shatters a trophy, it's going to go viral. He's going to be embarrassed, but who cares? It's not really risky, And I think that's kind of how I define J.J. McCarthy's personality, and the way that I think teams will like it is that there's something about it that feels a little risky, but all of the risk feels very well tamed. And I think compared to Caleb Williams, who might be too much one way for some people, and Drake May, who might be too much the other way for some people, I do think all these players are going to score very well intangibly. That is not at all what I'm saying. I'm not saying anybody's going to be poor. But if you were to get honest opinions from each coach on who they like the most, I think your highest person is going to be J.J. McCarthy in this class. And so when you add that to the building blocks, that kind of, again, spells kind of why this progression might be happening. And then I kind of started getting into it already, but the traits, good size but lean, good mobility, and it's the change of direction, not necessarily the long speed. I've heard a lot of different projection on what his 40 is going to be. I don't know what it's going to be exactly, but I do know that I don't care as much about what his 40 is going to be, because I don't necessarily think that he doesn't move like Daniel Jones. Like, Daniel Jones can run a fast 40, but he has to get going downhill to have any chance of it. To whereas JJ just really moves side to side in the way that like for example, anytime you run the option, like the old school option, when the quarterback has a chance to be that, BC whatever gap runner, I would never run that with Daniel Jones. I would run that with J.J. McCarthy, even if J.J. McCarthy doesn't run as fast as Daniel Jones, because I think he can, get into those lanes and, duck in or duck out and do those things that solid rushers do. Again, the leanness might be a concern there, but I do really like the change of direction in his mobility. He has the good high velocity arm, and again, young to grow into the arm and the body. So I guess this is the podcast where I'm finally starting to reference the shows I listen to, but I listened to Connor Rogers recently on the PFF, the stock exchange show that PFF does, and he was talking about how he talked to a area scout about Jared Goff, and the guy basically said, if you don't think the arm strength looks as good as you were expecting it to, just remember he's really young, and when a quarterback is 20, maybe even 21, you expect it to get a little better. We have never seen J.J. McCarthy play at an age older than, say, 20 years, 11 months, maybe, something around there. But so, that does at least create, that is the thing that age does, right? Age has nothing to do with longevity. I do not care that J.J. McCarthy could theoretically be under 35 for 3 more years than Michael Penix could be under 35. But that could be a significant difference in the age of J.J. McCarthy. And then his throw on the run accuracy is really underrated. I mentioned this a little bit ago, but there's a couple stats I've seen going around Twitter. I don't know what the exact parameters are, but they rate him as the highest, accurate quarterback in terms of completion percentage, which isn't really accuracy, but the highest completion percentage quarterback on throws on the run. And so that is kind of significant to show that trait in kind of a statistical way. And then just generally, he shows the ability to flash accurate passes into tight windows with that high velocity arm. So ultimately, the question comes down to, where would he be ranked in theoretical circumstances in a Superflex Dynasty League? And I do think that after the combine, when I get some updated mock drafts from some of the sources I look at that I think are waiting until the combine maybe to make new mock drafts, I think I might do a post-combine show where I take NFL mock draft ADP and I create my big board for fantasy using that ADP. I think that's going to be something I do on a show shortly after the combine. But in terms of J.J. McCarthy, if J.J. McCarthy, who I personally rank as having a first-round grade, even if it isn't the same kind of first-round grade I give on the other 3 quarterbacks, if he were to go in the top 15 or 20 picks, I would be very comfortable taking him around the 7th or 8th pick in a Superflex Dynasty League. He would clearly be over Brock Bowers, which I know will be controversial, but with the tight end situation and the combination of the draft capital and my personal grade on J.J. McCarthy, he would be over Brock Bowers, which would make him the most likely candidate to be the 107 in this circumstance. So I'm not 100% confident that's going to happen, obviously, and I don't know if I would put him at the 7th spot on my big board as of today. But if J.J. McCarthy is drafted in the top 15 picks, maybe even in the top 20, he will be the number 7 pick, most likely on my board, without any other significant changes. And that is all I have on Michigan quarterback J.J. McCarthy. This video is part of a longer podcast that can be found in the link in the description. This is the 2nd podcast episode this week, and a good bit of content can be found on this YouTube channel. I still really have no idea what I'm doing here, but I do think I'm getting better and better on the production side of things, so the podcast is not available on major platforms yet from searching, but should be available before next week. I would appreciate looking out for the podcast or videos on this channel next week, and you can do that easily by hitting the subscribe button. Either way, take care and stay safe.